conquers all, and whatever love doesn't conquer, sex can fix. Masters and Johnson Clinic has put out some interesting statistics on Ferguson. Apparently, a lot of people have been getting screwed. Nobody is having any sex. What?
Eric Holder helped.
Oh boy, here comes Eric Holder. A Lone Ranger. That's what Obama and Holder are like. It's like the Lone Ranger and Kemosabe. What do you mean us, Kemosabe? What do you mean we? We?
Where we begin. Good afternoon. I'm Josh Barrow, and for Ari.
Yeah, okay. Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming in. You're listening to Starcom Radio Network across America, around the world. The Ed Till Show, Monday through Friday, on all the big stories, breaking news, and of course, breaking balls whenever we can. That's what we do. You go, well, what's your show about? Breaking news and breaking balls. What else do you need?
Just a bit, there was a supporter of Officer Darren Wilson that showed up saying that there has been a rush to judgment in this case. Tensions flared just a bit as the protesters supporting the family of Michael Brown tried to shout over her. Police escorted her away to de-escalate the situation, and now it is once again peaceful.
One of those protesters, a religious leader from the area, called the criminal justice system in America as racist as it was 50 years ago. Sentiments like that remain strong in this tinderbox of Middle America. NBC's Craig Melvin has been doing some incredible reporting from the ground in Ferguson. Craig, what's happening there today?
Josh, good to see you. Let's start with the Attorney General. Of course, as you mentioned, Eric Holder is on the ground. We know that he was at a technical college here a short time ago. He met with some community leaders there. After that, he headed to a local restaurant, a popular restaurant, where he sat down, shook some hands. There had been some talk that Mr. Holder might make his way down Florissant Avenue.
So now it's the unseen Eric Holder. He's been there for hours. Nobody can find him. That's a good job. Good job there, sir. Nothing like the leadership of being nowhere to be found. It's called leading from inside the motorcade.
I was the third brother of five, doing whatever I had to do to survive. I'm not saying what I did was...
You think? You think?
Yeah, your vantage point's pretty good there. You can see the smoke wafting from the grill there. Yeah. This is a scene that we have not seen a lot of in Ferguson over the past nearly 2 weeks or so. You see cops, you see police officers talking to young men. You see black people, you see white people, you see young people, you see old people. They are sitting around, they're eating barbecue, they're talking to each other. They've got some music over there. I spent some time over there talking to some folks, and all of them kind of said pretty much the same thing, that being at that barbecue joint today, it's about a lot more than the ribs. They're sitting down, they're breaking bread, and they're talking about what's been happening in Ferguson over the past few days, and a lot of them are cautiously optimistic that tonight will be the second straight night of relative peace, relative calm. Josh?
NBC's Craig Melvin, thank you. The grand jury will continue to hear evidence in Michael Brown's death for another 2 months. The panel's considering possible criminal charges against Officer Darren Wilson. Of course, protocol states this is all done in secret, but it means any criminal indictment against the officer won't come until mid-October, if at all. The protesters are calling for justice, and to many of them, that starts with charging Wilson.
If Officer Wilson isn't arrested and charged,
then it won't be no. It ain't gonna be no peace.
Time reporter Alex Altman is in Ferguson. Alex, so we had Craig describing a somewhat calmer and more collegial atmosphere there today. Yesterday you had Captain Johnson urging protesters to keep their protests during the day in order to make it easier to maintain order at night. What are you seeing in terms of changes on the ground there? Are things calming down?
Well, right now it is about as clear and calm on West Florissant Avenue as we've seen in the past week. It's a fast-changing story, but generally the rhythms of the day have been that people come out all day, they clean up in the morning, they spend the days looping up and down the block, protesting peacefully, and then sometime after darkness, things start to flare. So we're hoping that for a second night in a row, that hopefully won't happen.
Alex, a letter from the Ferguson PD to the community outlines several really important commitments that the police department wants to make to the people. Really important stuff. Getting more black people to apply to the law enforcement academy and to the neighboring communities, police forces. Getting a better relationship with the community, between the police force and the community. And perhaps most important, a pledge to get cameras on officers and in officer squad cars. Really important stuff. These are important commitments. Are people on the ground talking about these things and saying this will make a difference?
People are talking about this a lot. It's hard in probably hundreds of interviews with folks on the ground here. It's hard to find a black man or a black woman who has not talked about the pattern of police brutality or profiling or some other injustice that they've suffered at the hands of the police. So people feel very disenfranchised. There is certainly sort of a cutoff of trust, and people do believe and have talked about adding more officers of color to the force as something that can make a difference.
Yeah. Well, and this is obviously a story about Ferguson. It's about the heartbreak and the tragedy there. Protesters on the ground obviously want justice for Michael Brown, want justice for the family. But to me, this is also a national wake-up call, because a lot of the circumstances that you see in Ferguson, from the segregation, from the deindustrialization that has left a lot of folks with no good jobs to go to the poor school system. These are conditions that not to mention the biased application of justice. These are issues that exist across the country. And just to look at one facet here, Ferguson is not urban, it's a suburban community, and you can see we've got some maps on the screen right now. In 2000, the poverty rates there were much lower, and the darker the blue on these maps, the deeper the poverty. And you can see from 2000 to 2012, a huge increase in poverty in Ferguson and other suburban communities there in St. Louis. Well, you can also see that same rise in suburban poverty across the country. So is there also a sense there among protesters, Alex, that this isn't just about Ferguson, this is about political changes that need to happen across the country?
You echo a lot of points that people on the ground are making. They say this is about us, but it could have happened anywhere. The focus of the story is a young boy who's dead. But as you note, there's a lot of systemic reasons that led up to the conditions that led to the encounter between Michael Brown and Darren Wilson. And until we sort of address some of those systemic things, it's not going to be possible to repair the breach. And these things are going to happen, unfortunately, sometime again in the future.
Yeah. Alex, the media has also been a big part of this story. You think just 20-30 years ago this would only be played out, during the prime time hours of the day. But we now live in a world where you have tweeters and bloggers and Instagrammers. Many people view them as journalists, and in some ways you can say that's a great thing because they can highlight some of the real issues that are going on, but they can also encourage bad behavior, as Captain Johnson alluded to last night, saying some journalists glamorize criminal acts of crime when they refuse to listen to the cops and move out of the way when they're asked to. You've been on the ground as a journalist covering this for days now. What is your response to all that? How have you viewed the way journalists have covered this from all angles?
Well, it's a very tricky issue as a journalist, and I don't want to generalize because there are a lot of reports of colleagues of mine who have had some pretty harrowing encounters with the police. That has not been my personal experience. I have found that they've been relatively obliging about letting me do my job insofar as it doesn't put them in danger. But there's no question that this has raised a lot of issues about press freedom. The only other thing I would add to that is I do think that the rising focus on the freedom of the press and the treatment of journalists does detract a bit from the nub of the story. I mean, this is a story about a dead boy, as we said, the conditions that led up to it, the frankly sometimes wild